My daughter called me just a driver in front of her boss when she asked me to drop her off at the company's anniversary dinner. I only smiled and pretended I didn't hear. A few moments later, I was introduced as the new majority shareholder of the company. What happened next was rather unexpected. I will tell you everything. First, let me quickly thank you for your continuous support. This means a lot to us. If you enjoy the stories we share, kindly subscribe to this channel. It will be great if you can leave a comment on which city you are watching from. We might just give you a shout out in our next story. Today's special shout out goes to Joanne Gray from Atlanta. We are glad you enjoy our stories. Now let's go deeper into the story. I was pouring my second cup of coffee when my phone buzzed across the kitchen counter. It was my daughter, Sasha. Her name lit up the screen like it always did. With that tiny pang of hope that maybe, this time, she was just calling to talk. But I should have known better. "Dad, are you busy tonight?" she asked, not even waiting for me to respond before continuing. "Can you drop me off at the Crestmont Hotel at 7? It's the company's 10th anniversary dinner, and parking there is a nightmare." She didn't ask if I wanted to come inside. She didn't even offer to send a car or pay for gas. I hesitated, not because I was busy, but because I already knew she'd made her assumptions about me, about where I stood, about what I was worth. But I swallowed my pride and said, "Sure, I'll be there." It's funny how quickly children forget. I used to drive her to ballet classes in a rusted sedan with a heater that only worked if you kicked the glove box. I'd wait outside in the freezing cold just to make sure she didn't have to walk alone. Back then, she used to call me Daddy and run into my arms like I was the whole world. But time has a way of sanding down affection when it's not reciprocated. Now, I was just a convenience, a last-minute Uber with no rating. I pulled up to her apartment that evening, and she barely glanced up from her phone as she stepped in. Her perfume filled the car before she even shut the door. "You could have cleaned this up a bit," she muttered, brushing something off the seat. I bit my tongue. The drive to Crestmont was only 20 minutes, but it felt longer. She was texting the whole way, probably coordinating her entrance or filtering selfies. The closer we got, the less she acknowledged me. Just before we pulled up, she gave herself one last look in the mirror and said, "Thanks, Dad. Just say you're my driver if anyone asks. I don't want it to be weird." I blinked. "Your driver?" I repeated, trying to soften the disbelief in my voice with a chuckle. She didn't hear me, or pretended not to. She was already halfway out the door. I watched her disappear into the glowing lobby, high heels clicking confidently, as if she had gotten there all on her own. I sat in the car for a moment, watching through the windshield as valets rushed around me, opening doors for couples in tailored suits and sequin dresses. No one noticed me. No one offered me a valet ticket. I was invisible by design. And that was the role she had written for me, without even asking if I wanted the part. What she didn't know, what no one knew yet, was that I wasn't just attending the dinner. I was about to be introduced as the new majority shareholder of the company she was so proud to represent. I own 60% of the business now, a quiet acquisition after the founder retired, and I had been planning to reveal it tonight. But her words, "Just say you're my driver," hit like a slap across the face. So much so that I almost didn't get out of the car. But I did. I smoothed out my jacket, checked my reflection in the rear view, and walked in the back entrance. The CEO had arranged for me to enter discreetly and be brought on stage halfway through the night. I stayed in the shadows, watching Sasha from afar as she mingled with her colleagues, laughing too loud, gesturing too big, performing the part of a rising executive. I saw how she leaned into her status, how people deferred to her. And all I could think was, she doesn't know where the ground she's walking on came from. As I waited behind the curtain, my mind flicked back to her childhood. The scraped knees I bandaged, the nights I stayed up waiting for her to sneak in safe, the college tuition I paid off in full so she wouldn't graduate with debt. All of it. Never once did I ask for thanks. But in that moment, standing off stage, I realized I had given her so much that she had forgotten how to value anything, including me. And so, I made a decision. I wasn't going to smile through it this time. I wasn't going to let her treat me like a background character in a life I helped build. I didn't know exactly what I was going to say in that speech later, but I knew it would be honest. And maybe, just maybe, it would finally get her attention. The ballroom was grander than I remembered. Crystal chandeliers hung like frozen fireworks, and every table shimmered with silverware and folded linen napkins that stood stiff like soldiers. I stood just beyond the stage curtain, listening to the polite laughter ripple through the room as the CEO gave his opening remarks. My name hadn't been mentioned yet, but it was coming. This was their big surprise, the moment when the founder's retirement would finally be addressed and the new majority stakeholder introduced. That stakeholder was me. I had spent the last 2 months in meetings, drafting paperwork, signing dotted lines. Sasha hadn't been looped in, not by accident, but by design. I had wanted her to see me differently, to witness that moment without a script or a filter. But now, after what she said outside, just say you're my driver. I didn't care about tact anymore. The CEO, a kind and nervous man named Howard, motioned for me. I stepped out, and the applause began before anyone really registered who I was. Sasha was seated at a table near the stage, laughing at something her assistant had just said. Her champagne glass paused mid-air when she saw me. I caught the flicker in her eyes, confusion first, then discomfort. I walked up to the podium, took the mic, and smiled gently at the room. Good evening. I began, my voice calm, steady. Some of you may not know me. My name is Raymond Wells. But as of last month, I became the majority shareholder of this company with 60% ownership. A murmur swept through the room like wind through dry leaves. I paused, just enough to let the air thicken, then continued. Funny thing, just moments ago, before I walked in, I was a personal driver for one of the staff members here. Laughter, scattered and awkward. Sasha's face was stone. She didn't recognize me in that role. I went on. And that's all right. We all wear different hats at different times. But it made me think about something important, about humility. About the importance of seeing people not just for their utility, but for their humanity. Now the laughter had faded, replaced by a heavy silence. Everyone knew who I was talking about, and everyone looked at her. I could see her shrinking in her seat, trying to smile, trying to pretend none of this was about her. But it was. She wasn't the only one who needed the lesson, but she was the one who needed it most tonight. With this transition in leadership, I said, softening my tone slightly, we'll be doing some restructuring in the coming weeks. Not for punishment, but for balance. We'll be keeping those who are not just skilled, but humble. People who treat others with respect, regardless of the title they wear. I ended with a nod and stepped back. The applause was hesitant, but it grew. I didn't look at Sasha as I walked off stage. I didn't need to. The message had landed. Later that night, as guests mingled around dessert tables and congratulated me with handshakes and half-hearted smiles, I kept catching Sasha's eyes from across the room. She didn't approach. She didn't congratulate me. She just stood there, shoulders tight, her expression unreadable. A few coworkers tried to engage her in conversation, but she brushed them off. Her power had shifted, and she felt it. The room had seen her framed in an unflattering light, not by accident, but by her own words. And she couldn't take them back. I left without saying goodbye. I didn't feel like dancing around polite lies or smoothing over the tension. The damage had already been done, and I wasn't going to be the one to bandage it with fake smiles. That night, I didn't sleep much. I lay awake thinking about Sasha as a child, how she used to beam with pride just to ride next to me in the car. How did we get here? How did gratitude turn into entitlement? Somewhere along the way, I had given too much without demanding enough in return. Maybe tonight was the first step in balancing that scale. And in the morning, I called human resources. I didn't rush the decision. I spent the weekend reviewing Sasha's personnel file, sitting in my home office with the blinds drawn and the phone on silent. On paper, she looked flawless, strong metrics, polished leadership scores, glowing client reviews. But numbers have always lied. They don't account for what happens in the spaces between meetings. The way a person talks to a janitor when no one's watching. The way they introduce their own father to their colleagues. I wasn't out for revenge, not exactly. I just wanted to build a company where titles didn't shield arrogance. So I made the call Monday morning. I told the head of HR, Denise, who knew me well enough not to question the intent, that Sasha would be reassigned to a supervisor role effective immediately. Keep her salary intact for now, I added. Let the position speak louder than the pay. The announcement went out Tuesday morning. It was quiet, no dramatic email, no company-wide memo. Just a department shift on the internal org chart, a line in a weekly update. But within hours, the buzz started. I heard from Denise that Sasha didn't take it well. She stormed into her office, demanded answers, and then, when no one would give her what she wanted, locked the door and stayed silent for hours. I waited. I knew a call was coming, and when it did, it came in the form of a voicemail, not a conversation. She didn't want to hear my voice. She just wanted to unload hers. I played it back that evening, standing in the kitchen with the lights dimmed. Her voice was sharp, tight with fury. I don't know what kind of power trip you're on, but this is not how family treats each other. You embarrassed me in front of my peers, you blindsided me, and now you're trying to humiliate me professionally. You think this makes you look like a leader? No, it makes you look petty. I earned my position, Dad. You weren't there for the years I spent climbing through that company. While you were off, whatever, buying buildings and pretending you're some corporate god. You want to teach me a lesson? Fine. Congratulations. But don't expect me to come crawling back. You lost me the moment you used that stage to take a swing at your own daughter. I stood there for a long time after the message ended. Not angry, not sad, just tired. That voicemail was the purest version of her I had ever heard. No script, no filters, no boardroom smile. Just rage. Entitlement wrapped in betrayal. And somewhere in it all, I could still hear the child in her. The girl who hated being told no. But what struck me more was what she didn't say. No apology. No hint of reflection. Just blame. Always blame. I knew then that I had made the right call. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel guilty about it. Still, I couldn't pretend it didn't hurt. No parent dreams of disciplining their child with boardroom decisions. I would have given anything for that dinner to end with her proud of me instead of scorched by me. But life rarely hands you the version of events you want. Sometimes, it hands you the version you need. I didn't sleep that night either. Not because I regretted what I'd done, but because I knew how deep this fracture ran, and how long it might take before either of us reached across it. The next morning, I asked Denise to set up a check-in with Sasha's new team. I wanted to see how she was adapting, not to gloat, but to witness. And quietly, part of me hoped she'd surprise me. That maybe, just maybe, this descent would be her turning point. I didn't hold my breath. But I didn't close the door either. She didn't knock. She just walked into my house like she still owned the space. Her heels clacked hard against the tile, echoing through the hallway before I even saw her face. I was in the den, reading emails, when her silhouette filled the doorway like a thundercloud. "You're unbelievable," she said, arms folded so tightly across her chest it looked like she was holding herself together. "Downgrading me in front of the entire company? Who the hell do you think you are?" Her voice wasn't raised yet, but it was vibrating with the kind of tension that begs for a match. I closed the laptop slowly, took off my reading glasses, and gestured for her to sit. She didn't. I wanted to tell her to calm down, but that felt patronizing. And besides, she wouldn't. Not now. Not when she'd finally gotten the nerve to come face me head on. "I think I'm your father," I said instead. "And I think you've forgotten what that means." Her eyes widened like I had slapped her. "You don't get to weaponize that word after publicly humiliating me," she snapped. "You think I'm entitled? Arrogant? Fine. Say it. But don't pretend this is about humility. This is about power. You're using your money, your shares, to make me bend to you. That's not parenting. That's control." She was pacing now, her voice rising with each word. I sat still, letting her spend it. Because I wasn't going to shout her into understanding. I wanted her to hear the truth, not just the volume. "You want honesty?" I asked, my voice calm but firm. "Fine. You introduced me as your driver. Not your dad. Not even as someone who helped you. Just your driver. You said it like you were embarrassed. Like I was beneath you. And maybe you didn't mean it that way, but it told me everything I needed to know." She stopped pacing. Her arms dropped. For a moment, just one beat, her eyes softened, but then her chin lifted. "It was a joke," she said, her voice quieter. "A bad one, maybe, but not worth a professional hit job." I stood, walked to the bar cart, and poured myself a splash of scotch, not because I needed it, but because I needed to do something with my hands. "I didn't demote you, Sasha. I reassigned you. There's a difference. I didn't cut your pay. I didn't fire you. I gave you a smaller team, a new title, and a chance to prove who you are without the comfort of a corner office. She laughed bitterly. You think this is some moral lesson? That I'm going to come out of this a better person? This isn't a movie, Dad. People are already talking. Clients notice. My credibility is shot. She looked at me like I'd ruined her. And maybe, to her, I had. That's when Lynn walked in. My longtime friend and the company's former CFO. She had come by to return some documents, but the tension was so thick she froze in the doorway. Sorry, she said. Didn't mean to interrupt. You're not, I said, before Sasha could protest. Actually, maybe you can help. I looked at her, then back at Sasha. Lynn worked her way up from a single mother with 2 kids to the executive suite. And not once did she treat anyone like they were disposable. Maybe she can explain what leadership actually looks like. Sasha rolled her eyes. Oh great, now we're bringing in the wisdom council. Lynn didn't flinch. She just stepped forward, her voice even. You don't have to like how this happened, Sasha. But don't dismiss it because it hurts. Pain doesn't always mean punishment. Sometimes it just means growth. And I've known your father a long time, long enough to know this wasn't about ego. It was about finally holding you accountable. Maybe for the first time in years. Sasha looked like she'd been punched in the gut. But she didn't argue. She just stared at Lynn, then at me, her eyes glassy with something halfway between rage and realization. Then she turned, grabbed her bag, and walked out without another word. The door slammed behind her like a closing chapter. I poured another drink, but didn't touch it. Lynn sat beside me, her voice softer now. She'll come around, she said. Maybe not today, maybe not next month. But this was necessary. I nodded, but the ache in my chest said otherwise. You raise your kids hoping they'll become better than you, but you never expect to become the lesson they hate the most. And that's what hurt more than anything. That for the first time, I wasn't her hero. I was the villain in her story. And maybe that's what parenting was all along. Being misunderstood for the right reasons. The first report came in the following week. Denise emailed me a brief but telling update on Sasha's department. Productivity was up, morale was higher, and, most surprisingly, Sasha had started coming in early. Not just on time. Early. I didn't respond right away. I sat at my desk, reading those lines over and over like they were written in code. I hadn't spoken to her since the confrontation at my house. Not a text. Not a call. Nothing. The silence between us had stretched out like a rubber band, waiting to snap or slacken. I knew she was angry, but this wasn't the kind of tantrum she used to throw as a teenager. This was quiet. Focused. It felt different. And that scared me more than if she had stormed into my office screaming. By Thursday, I decided to stop by the office. No warning. No announcement. Just a quiet walkthrough to see how the energy felt. I hadn't done one in months. Ever since acquiring majority shares, I'd been meeting more with the board than with the people on the floor. But this time, I wanted to feel the pulse. When I stepped into the building, the receptionist, new, young, eager, stood up straighter and greeted me with a nervous smile. I nodded politely and walked past the elevator, choosing the stairs instead. I needed time to think, to breathe, to brace. Her department was on the 3rd floor. The space used to be hers entirely. A corner office with glass walls and an ego to match. Now she shared a bullpen with a half-dozen others. No title plaque on the door, just a printed team chart taped beside it. And there she was, Sasha, wearing flats instead of heels, her hair pulled back, no designer bag in sight. She was seated with 2 junior staffers, huddled around a project brief. Her voice was calm, instructive, not domineering, not defensive, just collaborative. For a full minute, I watched her through the narrow pane of the door, and something tightened in my throat. I didn't know whether to feel proud or guilty. She hadn't seen me. I backed away before she could. I wasn't ready. Not yet. Later that day, I got a text. From her. Just 4 words. I see it now. I stared at that screen for longer than I care to admit. 4 words. Not a full apology. Not a capitulation. But something. A crack in the armor. A hand reaching out, maybe. I didn't text back. Not because I didn't want to, but because I didn't know what to say. She had taken a step. A real one. And I wanted to let it breathe before I rushed in and ruined it. That night, I had dinner with Lynn again. We sat at the same table we used during strategy sessions years ago, back when the company was just beginning to scale. She's not perfect, I told her, but she's trying. I can see it in the numbers, the staff engagement scores, even the way people talk about her now. Lynn nodded, sipping her wine. She needed to fall, she said. Not because she was weak, but because she'd never learned how to get back up on her own. I knew she was right. Sasha had spent her whole life climbing, but she'd done it on scaffolding I had built behind the scenes. I removed the structure, and now she was learning to stand without it. Still, not everything was smooth. One of Sasha's former peers, Carla, a longtime VP, sent me an email requesting clarification about the restructuring. She didn't name names, but the subtext was clear. Why did Sasha get punished while others with worse records stayed untouched? It was a fair question, and one I had to answer. So I scheduled a department-wide Q&A. No press, no fanfare, just a chance for people to ask hard questions face-to-face. I wanted transparency to be the new currency, and I needed Sasha to see that she wasn't the exception, she was the first step. When the meeting ended, Sasha came up to me, not as a daughter, not as a staff member, just as someone trying to understand. Are you proud of me now? She asked, her voice small, raw. Not for the numbers, just for showing up. I didn't answer right away. I looked at her, not her resume, not her reputation, but her. I'm proud of you, I said slowly, for finally seeing the people around you, not just the stares they represent. She blinked quickly, like she wasn't sure if I meant that as praise or rebuke. I meant it as both. We didn't hug. We didn't cry. We just stood there for a moment, two people with matching scars from the same battle. I could feel something loosening between us, like tension exhaling. It wasn't reconciliation, but it wasn't war anymore either. Maybe that was enough for now. A month passed. Then two. I kept waiting for the anger to creep back in. For Sasha to recoil, to rebuild the walls she'd always used to keep vulnerability at bay. But it didn't happen. Instead, she kept showing up. She stayed late with her team when deadlines loomed. She started inviting feedback instead of avoiding it. Even her posture changed. There was less stiffness in her spine, more weight in her eyes. I'd see her in meetings, taking notes, nodding thoughtfully at ideas that would have once made her roll her eyes. And slowly, the staff who once avoided her started to drift back in, not with fear, but with trust. They joked with her, challenged her, asked for advice. It was a kind of soft power I don't think she ever knew she wanted. Still, we weren't what we used to be. The distance between us didn't vanish just because she was growing. Growth doesn't erase hurt. It only reshapes it. I still hadn't forgotten that night outside the Crestmont Hotel, when she climbed out of my car like I was nothing more than a prop in her perfectly curated life. I couldn't forget the voicemail either, where she'd spat venom at me for daring to hold her accountable. Those wounds didn't just heal. They settled, became part of the geography of our relationship. And maybe that's what maturity really was, learning to live in a landscape you didn't design and still finding the path forward. One quiet Thursday afternoon, she knocked on my office door. Really knocked this time. She stood there holding 2 coffees. I didn't know how you take it anymore, she said. So I brought options. Her voice was casual, but her eyes were searching. I gestured for her to come in. We sat in silence for a minute, sipping the 2 hot coffee, letting the air settle between us. Then she said it, softly, like she wasn't sure if the words were ready. I'm sorry for what I said. That night. In the car. And in the voicemail. You didn't deserve that. I didn't say anything at first. Not because I didn't accept it, but because I knew how hard it was for her to say. She had always lived her life on defense, ready to win, ready to shield. Apology was unfamiliar territory. Thank you, I finally said. It means a lot. More than you know. She nodded, looked down at her cup. I didn't know how far off track I'd gotten. It's like I kept climbing but never looked at who I stepped over, or who was holding the ladder. That line, that image, struck something in me. I hadn't expected her to see it so clearly. I nodded slowly, swallowing a knot in my throat. You built that ladder too, Sasha. You just forgot that it was never meant to be climbed alone. We didn't hug. That still wasn't our language. But there was a shift. A quiet realignment. She left the office with a small smile, and I sat there long after she was gone, staring at the 2 empty coffee cups. Fatherhood never came with instructions, especially when your children become adults who outrank you in some rooms and underestimate you in others. But in that moment, I felt something rare. Not peace exactly, but clarity. She wasn't perfect. Neither was I. But we were finally seeing each other, not through the lens of titles or expectations, but through the jagged edges we had both tried to sand smooth. The restructuring moved forward. Some staff left. New ones came in. Sasha stayed, and she earned her way back up on her own terms. I never reinstated her old title. That wasn't the point. What she gained was something better. Respect. From others, yes, but mostly from herself. And in the quiet after all the noise, I saw her begin to walk differently. Not faster, not louder, just truer. And for the first time in years, I believed she might become the leader I had once imagined she'd be. One Sunday, I passed by her house. She was watering her front lawn, earbuds in, wearing a baggy t-shirt and sneakers. Not a designer label in sight. She waved at me. Genuinely. I rolled the window down and called out, "You need better irrigation." She smirked. "Yeah, well, I fired my landscaping guy." I laughed. It wasn't much, but it was something. A new rhythm. No grand reconciliations. Just 2 people trying again, with a little less pride and a lot more truth. And I stood by my decision. Every part of it. Because I'd rather be resented for setting a boundary than loved for letting her walk over me. Have you ever had to draw a hard line with someone you love, knowing it might break something, but hoping it might also build something better? Share your story in the comments. If this one hit home for you, don't forget to like the video and subscribe for more stories that dive deep into family, truth, and tough decisions. See you soon in the next story.